Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer, wanting to share just a couple of points. I'm really going to make this a very quick video. Just a couple of points on transiting Ceres that's recently ingressed into the sign of Capricorn, because she will meet up with transiting Saturn in Capricorn and transiting Pluto in Capricorn. And I personally feel that that triple conjunction is actually going to be fairly significant collectively in certain ways, although I'm not going to speak on that level today, but just some points for you to consider in looking at your own chart. Now, transiting Ceres is a bit of a complex goddess because her myth is primarily about loss and grief. It's unfortunately it's not one of those happy myths. It's a it's a myth that does bring about the experience of loss and grief in whatever form that will come. So meeting up with Saturn and Pluto, her energy is going to be wrapped up in the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn. And the myth of Ceres is that of Ceres, Pluto, and Persephone. So without going into her mythology, because I have done videos on this before and there's lots of information out there online as well, but just to recap very quickly, Persephone was abducted by Pluto, who is Hades, who rules the underworld, into the underworld. And as a result of that, Ceres, who's the earth mother who provides nourishment to the earth, food, crops, grain, all of that is because of Ceres. She threatened that she would put a stop to the crops and food and sustenance to the earth if Persephone was not returned to her. So the story around that was that Persephone was in the underworld for quite some time, and through that time, Ceres did actually sort of starve herself practically. She stopped eating and she did stop producing crops and food and things like that. And that's how the seasons actually have said to have come in effect. That is spring, summer, autumn, winter. So the spring and summer represents the time in life where there's renewal, rebirth, and new start on things. And that's a time when Persephone would come out of the underworld into the upper world, earth plane, and she would live with Ceres, her mother, for a period of time. This is the agreement that was finally came to an agreement between Ceres and Pluto and Jupiter, because Jupiter is the brother that was in, king of the gods. He when he found out that Ceres was going to make the earth barren, that was, alarm bells to Jupiter. Anyway, so the agreement happened that Ceres would have Persephone in the upper world for certain times of the year, and then certain times of the year Persephone would have to descend back into the underworld. So that's where the experience of death, rebirth, loss, grief, letting go of things, and then the experience of renewal, rebirth, regeneration, birthing of things, joy, spring, summer. So winter, which represents the process of decay and things dying, that's the experience of when Persephone was in the underworld. So when you're looking at transiting Ceres coming up to conjunct Pluto, it would be fair to assume that something about that myth is going to very strongly come to life there. That happens on the 12th of January 2020. Now, Ceres is going to move. Actually, I'll just show you guys the chart. So here's a chart for when this actually happens, 12th of January 2020. So you can see here that Ceres is 22 of Capricorn, Saturn's at 22, Pluto's at 22. Now, Saturn being here as well is what adds to perhaps more of the difficult manifestations that this transit can represent, because Saturn and Ceres together is also an archetype that would speak to separation and loss of some kind. And certainly Pluto there with Ceres speaks to that too. So it's a pretty difficult triple conjunction that all goes back to the myth of something dying in order for something else to be renewed and reborn. But it could be a heavy experience of grief and loss of some kind. So obviously this conjunction is going to occur in everybody's chart in different places. And what I want to say is this: I'm not trying to create alarm bells, not at all. But what I guess you could consider is that depending on where this conjunction is in your birth chart. So actually, before I talk about that, if you have a look at the animation, so if we just take this back a couple of days, you can see that Ceres is at 21. We can take it back to about 20. So at about 20 degrees, which is about the 8th of January, Ceres is moving forward, catching up to Saturn and Pluto. So in other words, the range of orb would be in play here. So the energy has already started here on the 8th of January. So as we proceed forward, 10th of January, you can see that Ceres is at 21 now, very close to Saturn, Pluto. We keep going forward. On the 12th of January, she's exactly conjunct Saturn and Pluto. And if we proceed forward another day, she's still there on the 13th. And on the 14th, she's changed degrees, 23rd degree. So she's starting to move away from that being in that triple conjunction. But the energy of this could well and truly be in play, from the 8th of January right through here till the 15th or 16th of January. So depending on where this conjunction occurs in your birth chart, that's obviously the area that will be activated if it is indeed activated. Now, we all know about the Saturn-Pluto conjunction and how challenging that's been in our life personally, depending on where it is in our birth chart, because it's essentially asking us to work through our deepest fears and resistances and to overcome them, actually. But it is about breaking down very old paternal imprints and structures in our psyche. So it's not an easy transit by any means. And this Saturn-Pluto conjunction has its final hit next year. And then that we'll sort of experience the end of that whole entire cycle. But before we do, next year, Ceres catches up with Saturn-Pluto. So something has to come to surface with that. Now, obviously, depending on where that will be in your birth chart, that's going to determine the area of life or circumstances you will be dealing with. But I just wanted to say that if you have conditions and circumstances in your life, anywhere from now, really, into the month of January, that is presenting as really incredibly difficult to work through, and then Ceres catches up to this Saturn-Pluto, don't be surprised if something does come to an end during that time. And an ending is never easy, even if it's a terrible situation. Endings are a process that evoke grief and a sense of loss. It's like when you lose a job that you absolutely hated anyway, there's a process of grief that will go with that, even though you're kind of happy to maybe get out of there and, start a new journey, whatever. An ending implies the experience of letting go because something is dying, decaying, being removed. And obviously that then creates the space where something new can be born. So this energy has to do with renewal and regeneration. But before we experience the renewal and regeneration, especially with Ceres there, Ceres, Saturn, Pluto, there must be something that we have to completely let go of. So that's what this energy actually speaks to. And as I said, Ceres and Pluto, that's the myth. When you see those two symbols together, Pluto and Ceres, it is definitely going to speak to a matter connecting to some kind of loss or grief that each of us need to go through. Now, depending on where that is and what's going on in your life, if you're not dealing with really strained and stressful sort of circumstances on that external level, then it may just be some kind of internal shift and process that takes place within you, speaking to an old paradigm, an old system, an old way of being relative to the archetype of Capricorn that now goes through a process of release and renewal. So it does have a positive spin on it, if you like, as we go through the entire process, but something must be removed before we experience the renewal and regeneration and any joy that could possibly come out of that as well. So that's all I wanted to share with you guys today. It's not an easy transit, so I thought if I just touch on it now and just briefly mention it, those of you that might be enduring particular circumstances that are quite stressful, that are looking like they need some kind of closure and ending, I suspect that the Ceres reaching Saturn Pluto in January next year, that might be the timing of it, okay? So just be prepared, just, I guess, be prepared from the point of view knowing that if you do have something very specific going on, that the month of January could be the time where you pretty much go through that process, so you can prepare to a certain extent. You can prepare by having some awareness and some knowledge about this coming up. And as I said, if it's not speaking to a very specific situation that's occurring in your external world, it can be something from within that goes through some kind of renewal process that really gets rid of old structures, old paternal structures. Capricorn, breaking down, that's a very freeing experience ultimately, but we can't go there into the freeing, liberating element of it until we actually break down those walls. Those walls can be, and often are, our own internal psychological walls of resistance that we have to the experience of rebirth and renewal and growth, because a lot of that requires us to step into the unknown, letting go of something that we know and stepping into something that we don't know, which is one of the more difficult things for human beings to adjust to. But anyway, have a think about it and see what that might speak to in your own personal life. And of course, if you have any questions, just pop them below or any comments. And I'll see you guys very soon with the full moon for December, which is the full moon in Gemini. I'll be back to talk about that and some other things that are happening as well. Next year is just going to be a really big year, I think. Bigger than what we've had. Some people might be thinking, wow, I just want a break. Actually, one of my viewers mentioned on one of my community posts, that viewer had some Saturn Pluto transits from memory, and they were just wanting a bit of a break, which I completely understand. But anyway, that requires to have your own personal chart assessed and have a look at the big picture of everything that's going on. This is just a snippet that would be connecting to a larger sort of story, right? So it is about personalizing it, but have a think about it, see what you come up with for yourself, and see you guys very, very soon. I hope you're all doing really well and riding the waves okay if you're being presented with waves. I'll see you guys soon. Thanks for watching and subscribing as well if you're new. Bye.